Alright. Oh, crap. Alright, what's up, guys? It's Mikey here. Alright? And I was going to make this video scripted, and I was going to edit it and put a lot of effort into it, right? So, there are two reasons that I decided not to do that and to just, speak on whatever is on my mind. Number one, Adobe Premiere takes up too much space on my current laptop, so I'm going to wait until I have a better setup to, put, effort into my content. And number two, I didn't feel like listening to the second half of it after I finished the first half again, because I listened to the leak of this album religiously, and there's one problem that I didn't realize I had with the album until I sat down to try and listen to this whole thing for this review, and it was the fact that, wow, this is really strenuous and awful to listen to as a coherent project. It sounds like a compilation album, but we'll get into that later. So for some background on this band and my experience with this band, do you see these two pieces of merchandise I have on? This is a small percentage of the merchandise I have, right? And you would be thinking, well, Mikey must love this album if he has a bunch of Notes on a Conditional Form merch. No, the reason that I have this merch is because, number one, I think it looks cool, alright? But number two, well, this album was marketed to be something quite different than it actually was. Because you see, when you call your album Notes on a Conditional Form, and most of the singles have a lot of political commentary and, woke stuff, alright? You pair your album with a name like Notes on a Conditional Form, and your lead singles are all very political and woke stuff that would lead to what you would think would be a very interesting album, right? Well, it was all very misleading, because what happened was Matthew Healy, there are two reasons for that, I believe. He released most of the good songs on this thing before it came out. And number two, he probably just has such a big fucking ego that he thought, well, my mind is so big that I'm gonna call this album that's just random woke, millennials, random statements that really aren't that deep and make you think they're deep. And number two, his mind is so huge, alright? That's what he thinks, dude. Cause he thinks he's so woke on this album. And that's the biggest problem I have with it, right? Because basically, I'm looking through the track list right now. I only have the track list pulled up because even though I've listened to this album probably more than anyone that I know, cause I love this band, right? I love them so much. These are some very forgettable songs on here, and I don't hate this album, but coming from somebody who I thought that their discography was spotless, okay? I didn't think that there was a single thing wrong with their discography before. The fact that, almost half of these songs I will probably never be coming back to, that really says something. And the fact that this is 22 tracks also makes this review more difficult, because there are so many pointless tracks on here that I have the track list pulled up on my computer, right? But I can't see them all. I shouldn't have to see them all, because I shouldn't have to talk about them, because a lot of them are pretty pointless, right? But I have to, because I'm going to go track by track and talk about every song on this thing, okay? Now, back to the background on this band. I talked about my my merch thing, right? I love this band a lot. They're a UK act from Manchester that has been making a lot of they've been creating a lot of mainstream attention, and they've basically built their brand on very synth heavy, R&B, electro pop, basically hipster music if I really think about it. But I mean, I love them, right? And I think that despite Matty Healy trying to be very woke on this record, very obviously, I feel like when he doesn't try to, and he's just having fun and trying to make something that sounds good, coherent, and is sincere through and through, without a bunch of yes men telling him that singing about his tucked up erection is fine, I think all three of their previous albums before this is one of my favorite albums of all time. This is their self-titled album. That, I Like It When You Sleep, and A Brief Inquiry are all amazing. I feel like their discography peaked with I Like It When You Sleep. but with a brief inquiry, I love that album too. And honestly, most of the reason it's probably shrunk on me is because I listened to that thing and that album alone for like a week before it came out, and that's all I listened to for like 6 months after that point. So it's probably just shrunk on me. But yeah, I feel like this album just shows a couple things about Matthew Healy. Number one, he did not care about making a coherent, enjoyable album here. He threw together a bunch of random ideas that he had, where he heard some like random dancehall music. This is like the only reason in my mind that Matty Healy would think that a song like Shiny Collarbone is okay on a 1975 project, he probably just heard some like random dancehall song that he liked and decided that was going to be the basis for the next 1975 song. I think ARTV pointed that out in his review, and I didn't realize that beforehand. I was like, wow, he's right. Matty Healy really thinks that he can make whatever he wants and it'll just sound fine. And it won't sound unoriginal, right? Because you would 100%, like, why would you... There's a big problem with this album. Why would you listen to a song like Roadkill by the 1975 when you can go listen to any Pine Grove song? Despite me thinking that Roadkill is one of the better tracks on here, it sounds like Pine Groves, dude. It just sounds like worse Pine Groves. There's so much obvious unoriginality and just so much influence from other artists on this record, and it's so distracting. And if you put it on in the background, this isn't that bad. Actually, no, in the background it kind of sucks too, because this album has no sonic coherency whatsoever. It jumps around from sound to sound, style to style, which is another result of Matty Healy just hearing something random and deciding that he's going to make it a 1975 song, just completely ripping them off, right? So yeah, but I feel like this is an unscripted video with no outline, so I'm rambling right now, but it's honestly just how I feel, and I have a lot to say about this. I honestly just don't feel like listening to this album again to make like a coherent script, so it might be all over the place, but when people ask for my opinion, I want to refer them to something, and this is what I'm going to be referring them to. Even if I'm not making this, I don't expect it to get many views because this is a garbage video. Like, I've probably already said things that I'm going to watch this back and be like, wow, you shouldn't have said that. But it's whatever, alright? So this might be a long review, because this is 22 tracks, okay? This is a 22-track endeavor called Notes on a Conditional Form by the 1975. You expect it to be really grand, coherent, amazing, right? So we're going to dig into the track list, because, dude, it's obviously going to be amazing, alright? So we start off with the self-titled track, because this band starts off all of their albums with a track called the 1975, right? And it's been pretty good. They've only gotten better with each iteration. So do you know what Matty Healy and company decide to do this time? They decide to completely change it and mess it up. And instead of giving the normal thing that people would have really liked, he decided to put a Greta Thunberg speech that you listen to once and it's like, wow, this is important. But why the hell is this on a 1975 album? There's not much of a point for it other than Matty Healy trying to be like politically correct and saying that he's doing so much for climate change, when realistically, he's not doing much here. He's just worsening the album's replayability by giving this really long speech that honestly, the only thing I like about this track is some of the like twinkling piano, and at the end, the transition from Greta Thunberg saying it's time to rebel or whatever, and then into people, that is a really chilling transition, and that's something I can't take away from the song. But then we get into people. Now this was the actual lead single off this album, and it is probably the most misleading lead single that you could ever possibly think of. I mean, they really... it's one of the best songs in their discography, but it is so misleading, it's painful, right? Because this is really woke, good political commentary, laced with some really nice punk rock guitars, and just... it's an amazing song, right? But then it goes into the end, Music for Cars, which I believe is a rehash of this song called HNSCC. It's something like that off their EPs, which I think their EPs are fine. Like, they aren't amazing, but I've heard all of them and I listen to them sometimes. But this is a transition that I don't feel like it adds anything to the album. It doesn't really take away from it. It just pads out the track list, which I wouldn't have a problem with, but it's making it so that when I have the track list pulled up on my computer, I have to scroll to see all the tracks, because this is 22 tracks, and realistically, it could be a great album if it was like 10 or 12, but I mean, I gotta save those points for later in the review. Alright, I am Fantano. And then, after that, it's just pointless, right, basically? Nobody really likes it. We go into Frail State of Mind, which was the second single off of this thing. This is there's not too much to say about the singles, because I feel like I've already talked so much about them, and they came out so long ago, that there's not too much to say about them. But Frail State of Mind is a good song. It's very, like, electric. It sounds like they're building on the sound that they had with I Like It When You Sleep. And this is probably a top 5 track for me on this record. It's about anxiety, and what really sells the song for me is the breakdown, like, in the second half of the song. Once this song gets going, it's beautiful, right? So we go from Frail State of Mind to Streaming, which is I think it's like a 1 minute, if I remember right, it's like a 1 minute just prelude to the birthday party. It's really boring. It pads out the track list. It's not even really music, honestly. Nobody's gonna ever listen to this song again after listening to the listening to the album for the first time and realizing, wow, I'm never gonna play this thing front to back again. So it's another thing that just exists and makes it harder for me to see all the tracks on the screen, but I'm not gonna add or take away from my score of the album because of it, right? Because I don't think it sounds bad. I just think it's pointless. So we get into the birthday party. This is a polarizing track because it blends a lot of genres. There's a lot of country influence, but I actually think that a lot of it is very beautiful. But the birthday party is the first. There's a major problem with this album that starts on the birthday party. There is a line in the second or third verse, I think, somewhere around there, where he talks about, like, turning on the water in the bathroom so his girlfriend can't hear him piss, which is kind of weird, but that I can get over it and still enjoy the song. I love the, like, sax solo at the end. I think that the lyrics other than that are quite beautiful, and I think Matty Healy sounds good. I think the subtle country influence sounds good, despite a lot of people not thinking that. And then after this track, we get into the first track that I hate on this album. It's really horrendous, and I can't believe that Matty Healy created this and thought that it was fine. So we get into Yeah, I Know, and I'm gonna click on the lyrics just so I can cite what my big problem is with this track. I think earlier in this review, I pointed out the fact that there are a lot of moments on this album where Matty Healy just says really substanceless things and just thinks that it's, like, deep or woke. So this is a track where it's a really boring instrumental, and Matty Healy has this really weird flow where he just says substanceless stuff. Hit that shit, go, hit that shit. He says that like 10 times on the chorus, and it's really awkward. And even the verses, they have the same flow. What they're saying is just as substanceless, and yeah, it's really bad. It's really hard for me to explain it because there's not much to talk about with it. It's just disappointing, and I'm trying to make conversation out of it that hasn't already been said a million times. But then we get into one of the first. This is the first great track on this album that wasn't a single. Then Because She Goes, like, watery, muddy guitars. It's very stripped back. It's just pretty good, like, indie rock, I guess. I don't really know what genre it would be, but it sounds like a 1975 song, right? It's just pretty inoffensive. Like, I don't like how stripped back it is, considering how much of this record is overproduced to hell, and it's just fine. I'm trying to say a lot about it, but there's just not much to be said. Jesus Christ 2005, God Bless America. It was like the fourth or fifth single on this thing. I don't really remember. It's around there. I think it's the fourth, actually. I think it came after the Me and You Together song, which is the third one. Uh, it's a lot of people think that he has a really huge ego on this song, but I don't think it's that bad. I like the like LGBT commentary with the like religion based stuff. I think it's fine. I think it's really beautiful. However, this is a point on the album where another problem that I personally have with this album starts. This is one of the songs that was played before this album came out, right? It was played like on a radio show. And it was this really stripped back, like sad, very heart-wrenching, like guitar ballad, right? But on this thing, there's just too much added to the mix, and his voice, the effects on it sound awful, but I can get past it because I love the guitar and I love the lyrics. So that track gets a pass for me. It's one of my favorites, which isn't saying much because this album is a mess. But then we get into Roadkill, which I think I already talked about it earlier in this recording, but it's a country song where Matty Healy, there's a line where he talks about his tucked up erection, and like I think there, oh, I'm gonna click on it. Yeah, I think there's a line about him pissing him. Yeah, there's a line about him pissing himself on a Texan intersection. I can't make this up, but yeah, so I think it sounds fine. I just think the writing is horrendous. We get into the Me and You Together song after that track, which is a great song. It's one of the best songs on this album. There's something very, it's sort of like Them Because She Goes, because it's this very muddy, like My Bloody Valentine-esque, like obviously way more mainstream and polished sounding than My Bloody Valentine. Like it's not anywhere near as groundbreaking as something like Loveless, but it's a great song, I think. It was the third single, I think, and it hasn't shrunk on me at all. In the context of this record, it sounds a lot better than most of the other songs because it's not overproduced, it's not underproduced, it's written well, there's relatability, it's not drenched in Matty Healy's ego. I think it's just easy to appreciate. Then we move on to the second half of the record, which despite me not wanting to listen to again in one like shot for this review, I think that it's a lot better in terms of quality. I think it's actually less consistent and like coherent sonically and thematically, but I don't have a problem with most of the songs on this thing on the second half. There are a couple that I don't like, but I'll just continue to go through like track by track. I think There's Something You Should Know, great track, sounds like something new for the 1975, although I guess you could make the point that it's electronic and it kind of still builds off of the sound of I Like It When You Sleep, but I think it's great. Fantano liked it, and Fantano's opinion is very important to me, okay? I love Fantano's opinion. Fantano likes this album more than I Like It When You Sleep, because I remember he gave that album a 4, but he gave this thing like a decent 5, which I don't know what kind of drugs Anthony Fantano is on to think that this really incoherent mess is better than I Like It When You Sleep, because that album is just consistently amazing. That's my favorite album of all time, by the way. It's just so incredibly interesting, groundbreaking, lyrics are great, instrumentals are great. Like I could praise that album for hours on end if I wanted to. I love it so much, right? But let's move on to the next track here. Nothing Revealed, Everything Denied. There is a choir brought on to here that sort of sounds like Sincerity Is Scary in the way that it's just really infectious, and it makes you like the song a lot more than you do during the verses. The verses are fine, right? Verse 1 is actually really beautiful, but the bridge is something I'm a little more mixed on. I don't hate it. John from ARTV hates it, alright? But when I say that, I don't mean much, because he thinks that Blurry Face by 21 Pilots is a 4.5, and he thinks A Fever You Can't Sweat Out by Panic at the Disco is a 5 out of 5. So John's opinion can't always be trusted, okay? I occasionally go on John probation, but I think that there's definitely a case to be made that the vocal effects on the bridge of this track are really bad. Like it sounds awful, right? But then once you get to the hook, it's like all worth it. It's so amazing. Like the choir, I wish they would do that more, honestly. I was hoping that would be more on this record, but That's the only track where it's really brought out. I don't think that there's a children's choir anywhere else on this record. But then we move on to my favorite track on the record, which is Tonight, I Wish I Was Your Boy. And this thing, it's produced perfectly, it's written beautifully. There's just not much, there's nothing bad about this song. It's wonderful. I wish that more of the album was like it. Because there are a handful of tracks on this thing that I think if you just took those and you took out all the bad ones, I think that there is a full, decent, record that's not too long, not too short, and it would have easily been like a 9 or a 10 for me, but unfortunately it didn't turn out that way. So yeah, love this track. At this point in the album, it becomes pretty obvious that Matty Healy did not care at all about making a coherent album that's enjoyable to listen to from front to back, but instead he pulled like a Migos strategy where it's 22 tracks and you just kind of pick out your favorite ones and put them in a playlist or whatever, which is disappointing, but it happens. The thing is, you can't expect artists to have spotless discographies, but I really think this is a miss. Shiny Collarbone. I know some people who like this song, can't stand it. It sounds awful. Cuddy Ranks sounds really bad on this thing. He's the only one that sings on this track. So Matty Healy isn't on it at all. But in Matty Healy's mind, he did something experimental and groundbreaking with it, right? He heard something probably at a birthday party. While he was he had the tap on and he was pissing, right? And then he heard some random dance hall song come on. He was like, that's going to be the next 1975 track. And it's going to sound like nobody from the 1975 is on it, right? There's electronics, there's some random dude singing on it. So it does not even sound like a 1975 track at all. There is nothing identifiable, with musicianship or lyrics on this track to the 1975. I'm gonna lose my mind if I keep talking about this. This is really frustrating for me to think about that this came out. If you're too shy, let me know. Great track. I hope that they kind of stop this pattern of... Well, actually, I don't really hope they stop it, but it's becoming a little obvious at this point that the 1975 with this album, they tried to follow a formula that they created with their first two albums, and it just doesn't work if you try to forcefully replicate it, which I think might have actually been a problem in the creation of this thing. But if you're too shy, let me know. It's the 80s, catchy cut on this thing. It's pretty cool. The horns, on the hook are nice. The lyrics are fine. It's produced wonderfully. It's great, I'm glad that it's turning out to be a hit. Playing on My Mind. A lot of people hate this song, but I actually love it. It's a rare moment on this album where you get to breathe. There's a lot of people think that this is drenched in his ego, and I guess I can see how the boomer line about phones can be annoying, but I think it's a really beautiful and sincere moment. Despite Matty Healy, you can say that he has a big ego on this cut, but I mean, in the context of this record, it's really not that bad. Having No Head, Fantano liked this song. I think it's pretty boring. The thing is, it's hard to not compare a lot of these tracks to their past works when they've already done what they're trying to do on this thing. It's just an instrumental cut that doesn't sound as interesting as the instrumental cuts on I Like It When You Sleep. Or this masterpiece. I love this album. I might do a review on this one too. I might do a review on all of the other three albums because I'm actually enjoying just sitting here and talking and getting my thoughts out. But after that, we move on to another one of my favorite tracks on this thing, What Should I Say, which is... how do I describe it? It's very new territory for the 1975, actually, and it's one of the moments on this record where it truly is something completely new, and something that if they took this and they made a whole album out of it, I think it would be amazing. It would be, so incredible. And they made it coherent. There are so many good ideas on this album, but if they get fleshed out, it's not for more than one track, and It's just disappointing that half of this thing sucks, but after what should I say, we have... I think I might actually hate this song more than Yeah, I Know. It's called Bagsy Not in Net, right? And it's super annoying. Another, like, dance hall cut that just sounds awful. I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to get worked up over it. Now, the last two tracks on this thing, they are definitely a breath of fresh air. Don't Worry is something that Matthew Healy's father wrote when in like the 90s, and it's just stuck with Matty Healy throughout his whole life. His father sings on this cut. It's really beautiful. Some people think it's boring, but it's another one of those moments on this record where it's like, well, this is an actual reason for me to come back to this record, because on a lot of this thing, it's just worse versions of what they've done before. And when they try to do something completely new and they don't like completely rip off some random dance hall song or some random country song, it's pretty good, right? So I like that song. Guys, this is also probably in my top 3 favorite tracks on this album. It's a love letter to the band. Honestly, if Notes on a Conditional Form was to be their last album and this was the last track they ever released as a band, this is a beautiful way to end things off, because as far as we know, we don't know what the 1975 is going to do after this, because they promised a 4th album, but going forward, there's not much that we know about. Apparently, in a Beats One interview, Matty Healy was like, we're going to release a darker version of Notes that's like a 5-track EP and put it on Spotify. I can't wait to tear that thing apart, because we know what happens when the 1975 tries to rip off what they've already done and just make it more appealing to Matty Healy. It doesn't end up well. But Guys is really pretty. It's about his friends. I think it's actually a cool idea that, because when Matty Healy was describing this song, he was like, there are not many love songs about just friends, right? It's normally about like romantic relationships, but this is a rare moment where Matty Healy steps outside of his ego and gives credit to the people around him, which have honestly probably done more for making the 1975 interesting than Matty Healy ever has done. He just gets more credit because he does not think about what he says before he says it, and he talks a lot. I love Matty Healy, but his bandmates don't get enough credit, right? So that was my track by track analysis, which, like I said, if I had went over my script, it probably would have sounded a lot better, but I don't really care. I'm just throwing this together because I want to get my thoughts out currently, which they might change, but as for now, I think that there's like a 10 to 12 song, like borderline perfect album in here, but there are just a lot of forgettable cuts, like the end, Streaming, Yeah I Know, Roadkill, Shiny Collarbone, Having No Head. Like, it's just disappointing. And yeah, I don't hate this album, but as much as other people do, but like I said, I think I said this at the beginning of this review, there was not a point before this album where I thought that the 1975 had a single bad track in their discography, despite what a lot of people think. I guess the worst one would be like Two Time, which in the context of their discography before this point was pretty awful. But when I heard it live, it really came full circle for me, and I was like, well, this isn't that bad, right? But yeah, that pretty much sums up my thoughts. If I was to give an honest score to this album, I would say like a 5, a 6, or a 7, like in that range. I just think it's a super mixed bag and was super disappointing, marketed really poorly. Well, actually, if his goal was to make it seem way more appealing than it ended up being, I guess the marketing was pretty masterful. Like, I really thought that this was going to be a generation-defining album, the same way that A Brief Inquiry was, but it just didn't turn out to be that. And honestly, if this was just released as like some random Matty Healy side project, like something on SoundCloud or whatever, I wouldn't have an issue with it, but this is the 1975 project. The 1975 has great albums such as this. I Like It When You Sleep, for You Are So Beautiful Yet So Unaware of It. A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships. All of their EPs. These are all great projects, and this is just a mixed bag. So in reality, is this album bad? No. Is it mediocre? I would say it's good, just as a standard album, but as a 1975 album, this is abysmal, and it fails at what it tries to do for the most part, because it's clearly trying to be something very woke, but Matty Healy doesn't feel like doing political commentary as he marketed it, more as he wants to make random dancehall cuts and sing about how hard he thinks his life is, which it isn't that hard, but I don't know Matty Healy personally, so I can't say that like his life is hard or easy or whatever, but honestly, at this point in his career, what the struggles that he's singing about, it just doesn't seem very sincere, and if it is, it's like first world stuff, like, oh, I'm struggling to find a relationship, you know. And on albums like I Like It When You Sleep, he was reflecting. There's a track called If I Believe You on I Like It When You Sleep, for You Are So Beautiful Yet So Unaware of It. He's singing about his religion, right? It's heart-wrenching. It's relatable. It's all of this stuff, right? But when you hear Matty Healy sing about his struggles on this thing, it fails to leave a dent because it's just so minute and not a big deal. And I love Playing on My Mind, which is kind of what I'm talking about here. He's just singing about how he can't find a relationship, right? I think it's beautiful, but here I'm gonna read some examples off of verse 3. But I won't get clothes online because I get worried about the fit. But that rule don't apply concerning my relationships. Like, it's just hard to take seriously at times, just like a lot of this album. Like, I don't understand how you can hear a cut like "Yeah, I know" and take it seriously, especially in the context of this band's discography. It just doesn't hit. And I think that about sums up my thoughts. This was a 30-minute video. It's probably going to be insufferable to sit through, and I promise I'm a more mature person than I'm probably coming across in this video. But I tried to review a 22-track album without much of an outline because I ditched that, like I said, because I literally did not feel like listening to the second half of this album again. I was listening, it was last night when I came across this epiphany that I was just like, oh, I'm just going to wing it tomorrow and just make it. Because I was listening to the new Brockhampton singles, which are amazing, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I told my friends that I would make this video review, but I just do not feel like listening to the second half of this record. I would literally rather listen to any other 1975 album, because I just don't find this thing enjoyable as a project. There are bits and pieces that I'm going to come back to, okay? I'm not going to pretend like I hate this whole thing. Some of these songs are going in my playlist. Some of these songs are the best songs they've released during this Music for Cars era. I can list a few that I think are some of the best they've released, in their discography period. But they're so few and far in between. People, Me and You Together song, Nothing Revealed, Everything Denied, Tonight I Wish I Was Your Boy, If You're Too Shy, Let Me Know, Don't Worry, and Guys. I think those are some of the best songs in their discography. But that is such a... If this was a 10 to 12 track album, that would be half the album that I thought was just amazing, right? So I would probably come from this album with a much more positive opinion than I have. But this is 22 songs! Dude, I have the Genius thing pulled up for this album, right? I have the track list pulled up. It does not fit on my screen! I'm having to scroll. That is why I'm using my mouse right now. And it is so insufferable that this is 22 tracks. But I'm going to lose my mind if I keep screaming. I'm just going to get more frustrated. So yeah, I'm going to end this review here. I'm just going to post it as it is. I'm not going to cut it up. And I apologize for just speaking off the top of my mind if you expected something more deep. But to be thorough with this, I would have to listen to this album a few more times, in its entirety. And I have an opinion, and it's not going to change because I cannot listen to this is 80 minutes long. I cannot listen to it a couple more times in its entirety. That's not going to happen. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this album. I'm going to put it on one of my second channels Probably, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna leave it up there and refer people to it when they want my opinion. So yeah, goodbye guys. This has been Mikey, the most toxic 1975 stan on the planet, here with an Imagine Dragons poster that I had like 3 years ago on my wall. Please don't criticize my music taste, okay? This is a very old poster, okay? When you were 8, you liked Imagine Dragons too, okay? Well, I got that when I was like 12, and I'm 15 now, but shut up.